What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another edition of the Jays for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh. We got Jays Jumpers, Jaron Jackson Jr.'s, John Morant's, Joe Johnson's, Jaw Raffs, of course. We've got Jays. We got him for days. Josh, how you doing?
I will just forever wonder how we ended up in a world where we went from midterm elections on a Tuesday to a U.S. men's national team World Cup roster being released on a Wednesday. That's just a lot of things for people to get angry about and a lot of tension in a 48-hour span. I didn't put that together until a couple days before. And then I went, oh, yeah, this is going to be a fun 48 hours because everybody's got strong feelings about everything with those two topics.
Can I be completely transparent with you?
Sure.
You could give me the entire list of the U.S. You could give me two lists and say one of them is, pick which one is the men's national team roster, and I would pick one based solely on the idea that I have a 50% chance of getting it correct. That's the extent of my knowledge, to be completely honest with you. To humor you though, why are people mad on this particular Thursday afternoon following a Wednesday release of the U.S. men's national team?
Oh, it's
roster?
nothing in particular. I mean, there were some surprising inclusions and a surprising omission, but it's just the idea. It's one of those things people get worked up about because everybody has their feelings about which players should be in and which players shouldn't. Just like, everybody has the politicians they want to win and the politicians they want to lose. It's just another and of course, it doesn't have the same overarching general impact because it's soccer and not, politics. But just the idea of, for people who follow soccer and care about that team, that is the most contentious thing that's going to happen in, the 4 years leading up to a World Cup is who is actually on that team. It all leads up to that moment. Just like all of the political discussion leads up to midterms and then presidential elections every 2 years when we have a big election. It was just funny to me that they went back to back. So if you weren't worked up enough about the politics, then you also have a World Cup roster to get frustrated about.
I'm not wrong in saying that was a result. That wasn't a result of the pandemic, right? This World Cup was always going to be winter 2022. Is that correct?
It was not because of the pandemic. It was decided, I think, 3 or 4 years into planning it, that it was moving to the winter. So yeah, that was not changed quickly. That was we've known that for years. Yeah.
So we can't put another thing on the pandemic, is what you're telling me?
That is correct.
Fine. All right. I kind of tend to blame the pandemic for everything that goes wrong. It's kind of my default setting at this point. But a highly contentious couple of days around the country, and the U.S. men's national team roster not to be left out of that. But in lighter news, the college basketball season started on Monday. It's now Thursday at 1:38, so we're awaiting I think there's one early game between two teams that I don't remember their names that is happening right now, but otherwise we're still waiting on games for Thursday. But 3 days of college basketball action, and there's not really a massive headline to gravitate towards and talk about, but there's things on our minds. There's tidbits, notes, points of interest that we've accrued over the last 3 days. So it is a college basketball roundtable in the purest of sense, where there's no real agenda, right? It would just be, if you were handed a meeting agenda, it would be the point in the meeting agenda where it's just like discussion, right?
Yep.
Like there's
questions, concerns,
right? That kind of thing. So we've got questions, we've got concerns, we've got things to highlight, we've got all of it, and we're just gonna have a conversation. So, Josh, if you had 4 minutes in the elevator, that's the longest elevator ride ever. 37 seconds in the elevator. What is the first thing you would tell somebody about the college basketball season thus far?
Honestly, if I only had to pick one thing, it's not looking great for the Pac-12. And particularly the bottom of the Pac-12 in terms of this conversation we keep having of, can we get some more depth here? Can this not be so clearly the worst of the high majors, bordering on getting passed by the AAC kind of thing, and can it get closer to the Big East and the Big Ten and the ACC? And then USC shoots 15% from 3, loses the rebounding battle by 10 in a loss to Florida Gulf Coast. UC Davis beats Cal for the first time in 34
USC.
meetings.
I believe you said UCLA. USC.
Yes. Sorry if I said UCLA. Yes, USC. UCLA did just fine.
Yeah.
And
I was like, wait.
Sorry.
No.
I apologize. So California things not going great outside of UCLA. And on the bright side, though, Stanford's Michael Jones, Washington State's Justin Powell were both really, really good. If you're looking for something positive, Stanford did not, blow anybody away with their win, but they did get a win. Justin Powell is going to be interesting if he's sort of given the green light and can actually handle that kind of responsibility. But for me, the biggest thing is, you're hoping USC can kind of keep this thing together without your big time recruit. That did not get off to a good start. Even Cal was taking care of UC Davis, and now they lose to UC Davis. These are the kind of losses that really hurt you come into conference play, because all you can then do is beat each other, and that doesn't help your resume all that much when your resumes of your opponents are not very impressive, as we've seen with this conference, and it seems like we're on the same track for that to happen again this season.
And at points, it looked like it was going to be worse, right? I mean, Arizona State was on their way to losing. They got hit in the mouth by Tarleton early, but was able to claw back into it. It could have been worse. Like, it wasn't all that far away from being worse. Yeah. But I'm kind of to the point where I'm not really batting an eye at the Pac-12 losing games that, losing bye games, losing games that they shouldn't. I'll just continue kind of with that theme with, the ACC had 2 pretty stinker losses too. Louisville not supposed to. That team is, I don't think I've ever seen a program fall from grace faster and harder than Louisville has. Louisville, and I tweeted this the other day, Louisville missed 2 NCAA tournaments. Or sorry. Louisville had 2 losing seasons before last year since 1945. 2. They're on their way to a second straight losing season. Unless something unexpected happens, they're gonna have another losing season. That's probably not going to be anywhere close to 500. It's just a crazy fall from grace for a Louisville program that is just it's wild. And then you had Florida State lose to Stetson. Actually, both of those. The A-Sun better than the ACC. I really can't find anything that says anything different. And North Carolina tried their best to lose to UNC Wilmington. So, not a great start for every conference out there. Even though all top 25 teams won on opening night, it was those teams there were some high major teams that didn't do so hot.
Yeah, and some top 25 teams look better than others. We'll get to those in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But also, Louisville, just the fact that you followed up that exhibition game with this, right? It was the ultimate kind of, you do need to worry when exhibitions go that poorly, because things like this can happen. And all of a sudden, Bellarmine is 21 of 43 from the field, 7 of 15 from 3, and 18 to 22 from the free throw line. And you lost again. Yeah, I don't have too much to add other than this is, you're really banking on DJ Wagner at this point, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a Louisville fan.
At this point, if he just makes it to campus and doesn't decide to go somewhere else, that's a win. Even if he's bad, if he's bad, like that, him getting to campus would be a win. Bellarmine, a third year of their Division I career.
Good program though. Very quickly
good program.
Becoming a good program.
Yeah, good program for sure. That's but just to add insult to injury, right? I just said that Louisville, at least since 1945, has been a Division I basketball team. Bellarmine is on year 3 and is not a great look. And maybe the most, you look up, it's like, oh yeah, Louisville's losing to Bellarmine. I'm not exactly surprised. Mm-hmm. I'm not exactly surprised. Let's see. Let's talk real quick about the very first game of the college basketball season. In the middle of the day on Monday, and let's talk about Baylor and talk about their guards. Very quickly, 40 points, 16 assists between the three guards. Keontae George and Adam Flagler had 15 of those 16 assists. Flagler was awesome, 21 points, 8 assists. Keontae George in the scoring department was not awesome, but did a really, really nice job facilitating. Had most of his assists at the halfway point. Had like 6 or 7 in the first half, I think. If they're going to distribute, and one of the last things I said in our preview series was, if there's anything I'm trying to poke holes in when it comes to Baylor, it's who is the guy that is facilitating. And I'm still of the frame of mind that I want a guy who knows it's his job every single night to facilitate. But if those guards can do it by committee in the way that they did last night, and Keontae George and any of them kind of can take on that role, and on the nights that they're not shooting especially well, then a lot of those concerns go away. But they very quickly, I mean, it took about 2 hours into the college basketball season for people to be like, it won't be long before they're being compared to Teague and Mitchell and Butler, which is not a bad place to start if you're the Baylor guards.
Yeah. I feel like Baylor might be the best team in the country at just completely sucking the hope out of every team that they play in non-conference that they're supposed to beat.
Mm-hmm.
You just look up and, it's 30-14.
Doubling up some poor small school from the Southeast to start the season, a tradition. Truly.
Exactly.
It's usually Central Arkansas, poor Central Arkansas. Yeah. The Bears almost always fall victim to this. But
there is no rust, no iffiness, no, we're still figuring some things out, and you don't feel great about the way you played, but you got the win by 12. No. That is not how Baylor operates.
No. Central Arkansas Bears also. I think there might be an adjective in front of it, but they are also the Bears. It's a Bears v Bears usually.
There you go.
But yeah, they made sure that Mississippi Valley State had absolutely no hesitation about whether or not they were in the basketball game at the under 12 timeout. They made sure that was clear. But one of the, and there were a lot of teams at the top of the college, at the top of the preseason AP standings that looked good, but Baylor certainly up there.
Yeah, and then. Are you okay if we talk about, well, I have some good and some bad. I have just a section of top teams I would like to discuss.
Yeah, I got a couple things I want to talk about. So just throw them out there. I'll respond accordingly.
Let's start with North Carolina.
Okay.
And you texted me during this game, so I know you have some thoughts you want to share. 4 assists on 22 field goals, 8 turnovers. Now, the 8 turnovers aren't bad by themselves. The 0.5 assist to turnover ratio, that's not so good. Outside of the 16 offensive rebounds they allowed, lots of good things defensively from a statistical perspective. Now, what that actually means when we get into ACC play, who knows? It's better than being bad defensively, though, because there's another team I'm going to talk about that they weren't even good defensively against a bad opponent. So that's something for a team that needs to be good defensively, and that was kind of the difference last season when they made their run.
Mm-hmm.
But also 4 assists and 8 turnovers.
That ain't it. I don't know what needs to be it for UNC this year. I mean, we'll see it at some point, but that wasn't it. Like you said, 2 of 10 from the 3-point line. They didn't seem all that interested in shooting threes. Like the guy that was supposed to come in and be the stretch 4 for them this year played 34 minutes and took 3 shots. I'm not jumping to conclusions about the inclusion of Pete Nance in the offense. I just have questions. And if your guards aren't going to share the basketball, RJ Davis and Caleb Love had 1 assist, and they took 23 shots between the two of them. Pete Nance is not going to score. Pete Nance is not the playmaker and the guy with the ball in his hands like Brady Manick was. You need to put him in a pick and pop, penetrate and kick it out to him in the corner, put him in places to be the stretch four, because Brady Manick was just a more dynamic stretch four than Pete Nance was. So if their guards need to share the basketball better, because that's how they're going to get the spacing that they want with Pete Nance shooting the basketball.
And it's not even like Brady Manick was some kind of wizard with the ball in his hands. He was also getting right. He had more of the ability to put it on the floor and make things happen, but he also was getting a lot of his looks off of not necessarily pick and pops, but running off of screens and making guys chase him and being open on the 3-point line, which you'd have to get that player the ball. So it's not like he did everything by himself, but certainly Pete Nance falls into a very specific skill set that you need to run an offense around him for him to succeed.
And he is not as dynamic as Brady Manick was, which is the most important part of that for me. So he had 6 points, 1 of 3 from the field, went to the free throw line 4 times. 2 of 10 from the 3-point line. I mentioned that already. Losing the rebounding battle to UNC Wilmington is unacceptable, with all due respect. That's unacceptable. I don't care where the splits were. I mean, you should probably rebound defensively better, right? Giving up 16 offensive rebounds is not a good look. And then the other thing I'll say is that, hopefully somebody contributes off the bench. I mean, they got 6 points, and those guys were 2 of 5 from the field. So that's the only other thing I'll say. I'm not going to sit here and I picked 4 days ago UNC to be a number 1 seed, and they found a way to get the win, which shouldn't be overlooked. I'm not giving them any praise for beating UNC Wilmington at home to start the season, but they could have lost that game. The opportunity to lose that game was there, and they didn't. So I suppose they get credit for that, but I don't know. At some point, we'll see what it looks like, the best of North Carolina, but I know for sure that wasn't it.
Yeah, no. But speaking of almost losing, if you're done with North Carolina, can we go to TCU?
Yeah, just keep rolling. Keep rolling.
TCU welcomes Arkansas Pine Bluff, who I think was something like second to last in KenPom.
Yeah, 358 or something.
Yeah, something like that. I couldn't defend the 3-point line to save their lives in the first half, which is very unlike this TCU team. They also didn't shoot the ball well, so they were in a hole. They dug themselves out of it in the second half, and so with about 4 to 8 somewhere in there, between the under 8 timeout and the under 4 timeout, I went, oh, okay, they've got this thing under control. They weren't winning by 10 or anything, but they had taken the lead, were playing much better. It just didn't feel like anything was going to happen. And then they just couldn't put Arkansas Pine Bluff away. And this game went down to the final possession, even though it wasn't like it took them the entire second half to claw back into the game. They made their run pretty quickly coming out of halftime, and we're back with a lead and looking much better, and still couldn't really put that finishing touch to go from, leading by 5 or leading by 6 to leading by 12 and really putting the game out of reach. Again, they did come out with the win. I'm not going to overreact too much. And also because it was primarily a defensive issue, that also gives me some confidence that can be fixed, because I believe in this team's defense. But,
they were 39% from the field and 19% from the 3-point line. It wasn't totally a defensive issue.
They also couldn't shoot the ball.
But
yeah.
So, they weren't as good as they needed to be defensively, but also them shooting poorly didn't help.
Yes, and that's the part where, as somebody who was willing to go all in on this team, I'm not going to jump off the bandwagon because of one bad game, but that looked an awful lot like a TCU team that hadn't taken the step forward necessary to compete in the Big 12.
Fair enough. Yeah, the thing I've kind of not gravitated towards, that's not the right word. The thing I've taken note of in several of these closer games is just how many free throws the high major team shoots, because they're just physically overwhelming for the mid-major team that they're playing, that it's just so hard for the other team to guard them without fouling. UNC took some 30-ish free throws. TCU took 38 in this game.
Yep.
Mike Miles got to the free throw line 11 times, and he's the type of guy, especially a big physical guard, that you're just not getting to come to Arkansas Pine Bluff. It's just not going to happen. Like you're typically going to be very undersized guarding a guy like Mike Miles, who is, and he's not huge. He's only 6'2", he's 200 pounds, but he's physical and, imposing, and that is tough for, and just talented, of course. So I've noticed in a couple of these games, I was like, you know what, that was pretty close. And, UNC and TCU are kind of at the top of that list in terms of, wow, that team shot a ton of free throws, and thank God they did, because if they hadn't, they'd probably lose.
Yeah. The other two games I want to throw out there real quick. Arkansas, Nick Smith Jr. obviously didn't play. The other freshmen did not look great. Trevin Brazile, Ricky Council looked really good. And Ricky Council, as kind of one of the transfers that nobody was talking about, went out there and got himself some buckets. If this is sort of the floor for this team, is that the transfers are able to compete and, hang in the SEC right away. And of course, Brazil's coming from an SEC school, play at a level that allows you to be at least a top 25 team before your freshmen even get going. That is not a bad place to start when you have a coach that is known for optimizing his team come March, not at this point. So if you've got the transfers already clicking in a big way like that, that's a really good sign. And, they didn't have any issues in the game. It just wasn't a spectacular display by everybody involved, but some of those transfers were excellent in their debuts.
I mean, so there were 3 guys on this team that took 14 shots, and they made 9, 6, and 7 of those shots, respectively. They combined for a total of 61 points. And none of those guys were the freshmen that we've been talking about all offseason, right? Jordan Walsh played 18 minutes and was 1 of 1 from the field. Anthony Black was 1 of 7 from the field in 30 minutes. Had 7 assists, had 7 rebounds and 3 steals. Productive game, but certainly not in the scoring department. It was Devo Davis, it was Trevon Brazile, Ricky Council. I have a big list that I'll get to kind of at the end of the pod in terms of the guys that I was most impressed by, the guys who kind of had the best nights of the early season thus far. Ricky Council and Trevon Brazile were both on that list. And specifically Brazile, like, he is, for a team as athletic and up and down, and he is the perfect big man for a team like this. He's perfect. He's absolutely perfect. He was 3 of 6 from the 3-point line. He can get out and shoot it. He can be a corner 3 guy. He runs to the floor really, really well. But both of those guys were on my list, to your point, that the freshmen were an afterthought. And the final score would have been something like 76-58 if there were no 5-star freshmen on the roster, right? Right. Which is not a bad place to start. And then you're going to bring the guy back that on a lot of people's NBA draft board is 3rd behind Scoot Henderson and Victor Wembanyama heading into this season in Nick Smith Jr. That's not a bad place to start. Very excited about the Razorbacks. What's the other game?
Finally, Kentucky, I just want to point out that CJ Frederick and Antonio Reeves had 42 combined points.
Yes.
You talk about where's is this team, the supporting cast, better than last season? What are you going to get to replace your Kellen Grady's and Ty Washingtons of the world? Of course, Antonio Reeves, CJ Frederick, not exactly Ty Washington, much more than the Kellen Grady, especially Frederick is a very comparable replacement for Kellen Grady with the way he shoots it. But you're getting that kind of production, even if it doesn't end up turning into, once this thing all gets sorted out and you've got Oscar Tshiebwe at something hopefully close to full strength, you're not going to need him to score 42 every night. But this idea that you have these 2 guys adding to, and Jacob Toppin also had a good game, adding to what you've already brought back from last season is a really promising sign for me that you're going to get what you need. And again, it's 1 game, so we're speculating based on what we've actually seen here, which is 40 minutes of basketball. But this is one of the reasons I continued to believe in this Kentucky team and pick them to win the SEC was I really thought we were going to see, not that they're going to average 20 a game, but they were going to get the production they needed from Frederick and Reeves, and game 1 they certainly did.
A couple things. Yes, them shooting the basketball is concerning for me as a guy who didn't pick them to win the SEC. The other thing I'll say is that you keep teeing me up. Casey Wallace was also one of the best players I saw in the
Ah,
first 3 days. 15, 9, and 8.
yep.
He is. I don't even like. He's the best guard on this basketball team. Which is, if that continues to be the case, and I know right, Wheeler is hurt. He didn't play in this game. But if Wheeler is better, like either way, Wheeler's going to be really solid. If he's better than that, then we really have an issue for other teams in the country. Or if he's just not, Wallace is really, really good, right? And he's right, and fair. It's the Howard Bison. With all due respect to the Howard Bison,
this is what we have to go off of, though.
He looks physical. He looks under control. He looks confident. 7 of 11 from the field, 9 assists to just 2 turnovers. We'll take a 4.5 assist to turnover ratio from a freshman in his first game, regardless of who it's against.
Yep.
He was really impressive. He was really impressive as well. But yeah, Kentucky looked good, and early in the season, the last few, Kentucky's had some stinkers early in the season on multiple occasions the last half decade or so. But this game was never in doubt. Didn't take very long. They're up 23 at halftime. So
yeah,
he was on my list of guys I was impressed by as well.
I just have a couple. Those were my top team thoughts. Okay. I don't know if you want to add anything else before we move on.
No, we talked UNC. I don't want to spend a ton of time on the schedule, but do you know how many games there have been between high major opponents so far? Would you like to guess?
0.
I was including the AAC.
Oh.
So that I could put Vanderbilt and Memphis, but the answer is 1.
1, yes. Okay, that was the game I was thinking of, and I went, well, that's not technically a high major matchup. So yeah. So that's your best game we've had so far.
That is the best game we've had so far, and I am, and maybe I just don't love college basketball enough, but I don't necessarily need the first and third teams in the preseason AP poll to play each other in the first 3 days of the season, but somebody play somebody. Like to be honest with you, if I'm a team that coming into the season is projected to be a bubble team, I want to play the 4th ranked team in the country immediately out of the gates, because you get the performance that you got from North Carolina. I don't want to play North Carolina in the middle of February. Why in the world would I want to do that? Now, great, or even at the end of non-conference, right? I want to play teams that I think are going to end up being good as soon as possible, especially teams that have a major shift. And there's not a ton of major shifting in North Carolina, but we've talked about how important Brady Manick was, and Pete Nance is there now. I guess, and I'm frustrated by it, to be honest with you. I'm frustrated by it. There's been about 3 games. I've been really excited about the college basketball season, and I think there have been 3 games that I've actually been enticed by watching. I've watched more because that's what was there to watch, but I'm frustrated by the lack of games that I genuinely want to watch early in the season, and we still have through the weekend. Well, we don't really have any of those games over the weekend either.
We got one.
Who?
Gonzaga, Michigan State on the aircraft carrier.
Okay, fair. There's Gonzaga, Michigan State on the aircraft carrier, but
other than that,
the point is the same, and I'm all here for thank goodness for Belmont knocking down, thank goodness for buzzer beaters and crazy, Bellarmine Louisville games, and Providence somehow pulling another game that they shouldn't have won out of their butt. I don't get it. I wish the viewing experience was a little better early in the season, and I also don't understand. I don't understand why teams don't use while the good teams are still truly figuring out who they are, not using that opportunity to maybe sneak in a win that if you played them on December 17th, after they've had a month and a half to play, that you might not win. I won't say anything else, but that's those are my 2 cents on that.
The scheduling of the Champions Classic, I think, is throwing this kind of out of whack too. because that's supposed to be that first marquee event, right? Where, okay, the rest of the slate usually isn't great, but nobody pays attention because we have Duke, Kentucky, and Kansas to talk about. And sometimes Michigan State gets thrown into that category as a preseason top 10 team too, depending on the season. And so we had that to talk about for a little bit, and then you get something interesting that weekend, and then you're kind of off and running. Whereas now that it's that second week, for whatever reason, there was nothing to replace it, so now it just feels sort of empty until we get to it. We just have to wait 9-10 days, whatever it is, to get there.
Exactly.
Speaking of Providence, Bryce Hopkins, that's good news. Very good performance. The bad news is Ryder was 9 of 14 from 3. Yes, they won. You got to do the basics better than that, though, to replace everything you lost last season, even with the talented transfers they brought in. And then the other Big East team I wanted to mention, I had a little Big East section. Not a good sign for Georgetown that Coppin State can play with you while making 13 threes at 34%. It's not like they were shooting the lights out. Looking at this stat sheet, I was sort of trying to figure out why Coppin State was hanging with Georgetown. And the conclusion I came to is, well, they just made more 3-pointers, but it's not like they shot it great. So that's not a good sign for Georgetown. And then the only other thing I wanted to talk was Memphis Vandy real quick.
Okay.
If you've got more stuff to throw in there.
Big East, we love Manny Bates, 25 and 11.
Big time.
We love Manny Bates. The Andre Cabello experience is a freaking movie. I mean, within 70 seconds into the season, he had a steal, an assist, a dunk, an and one, and a technical foul. 70 seconds into the season. Impressive. And then the last thing I have, we can talk Vandy Memphis real quick. But then the last thing I have is just some performances that I want to spotlight.
Let's end with that.
Okay.
I like that idea. Yeah. Really, I just have two things I want to say about this game. One, Memphis's offensive ceiling is much higher if Kendrick Davis just continues to attack the paint. He did at the very beginning of the game. Vanderbilt couldn't stop him. Now, he didn't get to the basket all that much, but he was, forcing rotations, getting assists, just causing all kinds of chaos by getting to somewhere inside the paint and just messing with Vanderbilt's defense. And then he started shooting the ball, and he didn't shoot the ball great. And all of a sudden, they were a little bit less dynamic offensively. If that is the basis for their offense and he can continue to be aggressive and not settle for 3-pointers, and I know he can hit them, but if you've got that kind of guard, and again, right, Memphis, we know what we're getting defensively. What is going to determine their ceiling is whether they can get better offensively. And you have a guy, and he showed it in flashes in this game, that can just be unguardable and completely change the way teams have to defend you. I just wanted to see more of that from him because he kind of got away from it as the game went on and had less of an impact. And the second thing, Jerry Stackhouse is a legitimately good basketball coach. Just the way that they were able to hang in there, the way that they looked fundamentally against a team that's much more talented than them, doing the little things right. Again, you got some freshmen playing in there, guys who have never had big roles before because you don't have Scottie Pippen Jr. anymore. They're not going to be great, but I continue to, and it's not like I watch Vanderbilt all that much, but when they're in the spotlight in a game like this, I was really impressed with Jerry Stackhouse and just the way he got his team ready and what they were able to put on the floor, even though it did come in a defeat. That if you give him the talent, you give him time to develop all of these promising freshmen they now have, I really do think he can do some incredibly good things from a sort of long-term perspective if you stick with him, and it certainly looks like Vanderbilt is going to do
that. There wasn't a single minute played by someone not a senior for Memphis. They, going into another, props to Penny, first of all, for the first, their first 2 games are on the road. But going in, playing at Vanderbilt, I got massive. I mean, you'll be shocked to hear that I love that after what I just said about the schedule. Alex Lomax is just a super, I don't know, like him as a college basketball player gives me a warm fuzzy feeling. I don't know how else to describe it, right? 10-10, 3-3, and he's so Memphis, and he, played in Memphis before and then committed to Memphis as Penny became the coach there. So he is it's just been a cool cool career for Alex Lomax, and to see him, double 10-10 is cool. Yeah, it wasn't the best of performances for Memphis, but they went on the road, got a win, and looked like a pretty composed basketball team doing it. So that's a pretty good place to start. And they play at St. Louis on the 15th. There are some couple weird gaps in teams' schedules also. I mean, like Butler played on Monday. They don't play again until Monday. But there's some weird gaps that I at least don't remember being there before, but maybe I'm just misremembering.
I'm telling you, it's all messed up because the Champions Classic.
You're probably right. Anything else before I just throw out a bunch of performances before we get out of here?
No, go for it.
Okay. The best players I've seen in the first few days. Villanova's Caleb Daniels, 24, 10, and 4. It took him like 38 minutes in the game to miss a 3-pointer. Until Justin Moore comes back, at least, he's going to have to be the guy. Until Cam Whitmore comes back, he's going to have to be the guy. And he looked like a guy who was up for being the guy. So 24, 10, and 4, and having a guy like that Kyle Neptune, as a brand new coach, can lean on is super important. That sometimes it's just, okay, we need to lean on Caleb there. And that's a very nice handicap for a brand new head coach. Jet Howard looks like a playmaking, scoring, facilitating NBA player already. I mean, that guy moves like an NBA player and has the size of an NBA player. 21-5 in his first game at Michigan. He was super impressive. Jump in at any point to talk about anybody that I touch on, but he was spectacular. He moves, and we talked about Jordan Tucker at Butler. It never turned into overwhelming on-court performance, but you could tell that Jordan Tucker moved different than everybody else at Butler. He kind of glided in a way that most of them didn't, and Jet seems to move different, and that's at Michigan, he was impressive.
Yeah, it's probably, in terms of trying to actually sort of get this transition from getting the talent that you have in this recruiting class to actually turn that into tangible results on the court. Having your son as the guy to do that probably helps a little bit in terms of that transition and making, getting your ideas across in that gap, expanding that gap between high school and college. But that's those freshmen need to be good. And so far so good for Michigan.
We talked about Kaysen Wallace. We talked about Trevin Brazil. 15-9-8 for Kaysen, 21-12 on 3 of 6 from deep for Trevon Brazil. Another big that, if he comes back next year, is probably I'm almost ready to jump on he might be the preseason player of the year at the beginning of next season. That's Coleman Hawkins, 23-12 on 4 of 8 from deep. If all of these bigs leave, and I mean, not if, when all of these bigs leave, I'm sure there will be some freshmen, but when you Marcus Sasser won't be here, Kendrick Davis won't be here. It might be Coleman Hawkins, especially, I mean, and granted, it's game 1 of the season against a directional school from Illinois. But 23-12 on 5 of 8 from deep. 5 of 8 from deep. He was super impressive. So he's on my list as well. There were 12 30-point performances between 11 players so far. UAB's Jelly Walker, shouts to Jelly Walker, at 38. UNC, what's the A? UNC Asheville. Thank you. I was like, you should just write down Asheville when I was writing these things down, and I didn't. Drew Pember had 40 points and 9 rebounds in an overtime win. And then Cam Tyson from Seattle had 35 points. Do you know who the only college basketball player so far this season who have 2 30-point performances is?
I'm going to guess, and I'm almost positive it's wrong, but Antoine Davis.
No, it is Foster Lawyer.
Is it really? That is a phenomenal piece of trivia.
38 points in game 1, 30 points in game 2. He's averaging 34. He's 11 of 20 from deep. His brother Fletcher at Purdue and Braden Smith, that was the other thing I wanted to say. Those guys have been spectacular. But and I think Braden Smith might be the next coming of Aaron Craft. But I'm holding on to that excitement. He had 7 steals in the first game of his career. But that's all I've got. Anything else?
I'm glad we got Foster Lawyer in there.
Me
Making
too.
sure we hit the important stuff.
Yes, absolutely. But that's all we've got for you today. College basketball season well underway, and we'll be back next week. Thank you so much. Please subscribe to the Jays for Days podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at Jays for Days Pod. Check out the TikTok, check out the YouTube, check out all of those fun things, and we'll be back next week for the Champions Classic preview. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Jays for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh, and we will see you later.